You can't hear Mary?
I can now. Sorry, I do apologise.
Okay.
Do you want me to switch my camera on, or?
No, Councillor Malik, leave your camera off. Okay. Good morning, everybody. So the live stream has now started. I'm Councillor Diane Donaldson, and I'll be chairing this hearing of the Subcommittee C of the Licensing and Public Protection Committee of Birmingham City Council. Before we start, can you all please mute your microphones for the moment in order to improve the sound quality whilst I outline the procedure. Can you also please turn off your cameras with the exception of the committee members, unless you are the person speaking. This is to reduce bandwidth. Could everyone attending today's meeting please put their mobile phones on silent and ensure that they are situated in a room or environment which is free from distractions or any unnecessary noise emanating from radios, TVs, etc. Thank you for that. I'm speaking slowly and clearly so everyone can follow. It is vitally important, for what I hope are obvious reasons, that those attending the meeting and making representations are able to hear me and members of my subcommittee and officers. Any distractions brought to my attention could result in the meeting being suspended temporarily or to another date and time under the regulations for these types of meetings. I also confirm that this is a public meeting and therefore is being live streamed on the City Council's website in order that the general public can view it. I advise that this is a public meeting. It will be webcast for live or subsequent broadcast via the Council's meeting YouTube site via the link in the agenda, and that members of the press public may record and take photographs except where there are confidential or exempt items. Members are reminded they must declare all relevant pecuniary and non-pecuniary interests arising from any business to be discussed at this meeting. If a disclosable pecuniary interest is declared, a member must not speak or take part in that agenda item. Any declarations will be recorded in the minutes of the meeting. So apologies, Councillor Diane Donaldson was nominated the substitute third member and Phil Davis is the nominated member for Councillor Brennan. Can I welcome you to this hearing for an application in respect of, and we're having a debate this morning if this is X-over or crossover spaces, 9 George Street, Borsall Heath, Birmingham, B12 9RG. Could somebody clarify what the pronunciation is, please?
Good morning, Chair. I have to confess I didn't actually know. I didn't ask myself, but it is X-over.
X-over. Okay,
yeah.
Thank you. I'll begin with some introductions. As stated previously, I'm Councillor Diane Donaldson and I'm chairing this meeting of the Licensing Subcommittee. With me are other members of the subcommittee, Councillor Mary Locke and Phil Davis. Also present in the meeting are the following officers: Licensing Officer Shahid Yasser.
Good morning, Chair.
Morning. Committee Manager, Meeting Manager Phil Wright.
Good morning, Chair.
Good morning. Committee Lawyer Joanne Swampillai.
Good morning, Chair.
Good morning. Could I ask all the parties to identify themselves, please? Firstly, the applicant, Duncan Craig, barrister.
Well, I'm here to represent the applicant. The director, Rich Hanlon, sits to my left, and I'm here to represent the applicant. Thank you, and good morning, everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Craig. Next, those making representations, Councillor Zur Malik.
Good morning, Chair. And the committee, I'm representing the residents surrounding the application of 19 George Street.
Good morning, Councillor Malik.
Right.
Could I ask if any persons making representations wishes to withdraw their representations at this stage of the hearing? I'll take that as a no. I assume that all parties have read and understood the Licensing Committee's procedural rules sent out with the notice of today's hearing. Please note that given the nature of today's proceeding, I may at my discretion amend the procedural rules to reflect the fact that this meeting is taking place online. But wish to assure you all that any such amendments will not impact on the parties' right to a fair hearing. We'll be using the chat function in Microsoft Teams to communicate. One of the icons on your toolbar is a speech bubble. Click the speech bubble to go into chat if you do not have access to the chat function for any reason. Please use the raise a hand function to indicate you wish to speak. That button is usually fourth from the right on the toolbar. You can also, of course, indicate verbally that you wish to speak at the appropriate time. Can you all confirm that you have access to the chat facility by typing your own name now? Officers will also type their job title. The meeting will not proceed until you have done so.
I think they're all there, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Malik, you've raised your hand.
Yeah, sorry, Chair, just to let you know, my internet's gone down, so I'm actually tethering from my mobile phone, just to let you know, so
Okay, all right,
something
thank you.
happened. Cheers.
Thank you, Councillor. All right. So that's everyone. Please keep this chat column open for the entire duration of the meeting in order that everyone can follow the messages being posted in the chat. If any participant has dialed in on an audio telephone rather than Microsoft Teams, please speak now to confirm that you can hear and be heard. With the exception of subcommittee members, please keep your camera off unless you are the person speaking. If there are any problems with bandwidth, which cause difficulties with the sound, I may, in my discretion, ask everyone to turn their cameras off in order that the meeting can proceed with everyone able to hear and be heard. Does anyone wish to make any preliminary points at this stage? If so, please indicate that you wish to raise a point by typing speak into the chat function or using the raise a hand function now. Thank you.
Chair, I think Mr. Craig wants to raise something.
Oh, so,
A hand is raised.
sorry, I didn't see you. You were not on my screen. Sorry,
Well,
Mr.
I have
Craig.
four hands, so you might not have seen it. Couple of, do I take that down now?
Yes.
A couple of points. I emailed licensing. I'm not going to dwell on this, but I did email licensing about some of the representations, and I just want to check whether you've had the opportunity to read that and consider that.
Yeah, yes, we have. Yes.
Okay, and I presume we're just carrying on with the hearing as it stands. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes.
Very well, thank you. Secondly, Councillor Malik hasn't made any representations. I just want to be clear. He says he's here to represent, I think he said the residents. Just to be clear, because this is obviously very important for a number of reasons that may extend beyond today. Just want to be clear, does he purport to represent all the residents who've made representations? Does that include any of the commercial entities that have made representations? Does that include those representations that have been disallowed as not being relevant? And does he have that consent in writing? Please, I think it's important for the purposes of today. It's simply not satisfactory for him to just say, I'm here to represent the residents. There are a number of representations, and I think it's right that everybody understands what the nature of his involvement in the hearing is.
Thank you, Mr. Craig.
For that, he's a member of the City Council, and I think he's under an obligation to be very clear on what basis he's here.
Councillor Malik, would you like to?
Yeah, sure.
Coming up, please.
I actually sent an email to licensing saying that, you know, the people that I'm representing, and unfortunately, Mr. Craig raises this point. The reason and the sad aspect of this is the reason that I'm here representing the residents, because the residents actually feel intimidated. Hence, they put all their objections in to licensing, and when they had a visit from whoever inquiring why they were objecting, they started withdrawing their names, and that's when they got in touch with me and asked me to represent them.
Mr. Malik,
excuse me, Mr. Craig. Let me finish, if you don't mind. I did report the incident to the police as well. So I don't know what came of it, because the police actually, whether they visited or spoke to them or not, but the sole reason I'm here representing the residents is on their behest, on their request, because they feel intimidated.
Which residents are you here to represent? That was the question.
I'm here to represent the residents locally that live in the vicinity. I don't have to give you, Mr. Craig, the names of the residents. If the panel need to know, I will email them everything. But I'm not here to give you the specific names of the residents that have come to me. And as I said before, the sole purpose of me representing them today is because they felt intimidated. Otherwise, it's a sad case of affairs that, you know, a councillor is speaking on behalf of you, even though I can. It's residents that live right next to your premises and the businesses that are there.
Well, I feel compelled to raise this point, and I'm going to invite you to take legal advice upon this. He's refusing to name who he's here to represent, so I don't believe he has any standing in these proceedings.
Chair, do you want me to clarify the position from licensing?
Shahid, yes, please come in on that.
So, Chair, we've got appendices 1 to 8, which are the representations which we will be considering, or which you should be considering, and Mr. Councillor Zohar Malik is representing just those people at those appendices, so nobody else outside of that report. I hope that clarifies things.
So is he instructed to represent all of them? That's all I want to know.
Yes,
right,
don't
thank you. Thank you.
Nobody else, or any representations that were made and subsequently withdrawn are not part of this hearing. So the only thing we're taking into consideration is appendices 1 to 8, and Mr. Councillor Zohar Malik is representing those.
Well, thank you, Mr. Yasser, for answering that question that I put to the councillor. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shahid. Councillor Malik, your hand is still raised.
You're on mute, Councillor Malik.
I says, sorry, I didn't mute myself. I says, I want this minuted that I take offence to what Mr. Craig basically made an allegation that, you know, to words of that, you know, I wasn't representing them or I didn't have any proof. But, you know, subsequently, it's been clarified anyway, so I'm okay to move on.
Well, okay, let's get on with it. It's being recorded. If you've got any issues with anything I've said, you can go to the Bar Standards Board. That's fine. Can we probably just get on the hearing now?
Thank you for that, and I will take.
Sorry,
Thank you for
sorry
giving
to-
that advice. I will take it.
Can we now proceed with the hearing? Thank
Sorry
you.
to interject, Chair. Mr. Craig, are you raising an objection of any kind that you want the members to consider? Or
Not
are you happy to
because
proceed?
Mr. Yasser has answered the question. I needed to clarify who Councillor Malik was here to represent, because he just said the residents. Well, that's a meaningless and nebulous term, but thankfully Mr. Yasser's clarified the position for me, because I wasn't aware of who he was here to represent.
Thank you.
Right, so everything's been clarified now. Can
Yeah,
we move on with the proceeding? Thank you. I'll now briefly outline the procedure which will be following at today's hearing. Firstly, the licensing officer, Shahid Yasser, will present the report. Then the applicant and their representative will be asked to present their case. We're asking if this could be kept to approximately 20 minutes. Then those making representations will be invited to make their case. Again, approximately 20 minutes will be allowed for this part of the hearing. Can I ask all parties to speak as slowly and as clearly as they possibly can, because the officers are taking notes by hand for the minutes. And the meeting is being live streamed on the City Council's website. If at any time it's somebody else's turn to speak, please mute your microphone and the chat function, communicate if necessary. Please note that members of the subcommittee will be able to ask questions at any stage, and we'll try to do so at the conclusion of each presentation. Cross-examination by the applicant and those making representations will not be permitted unless the members consider it appropriate. Where questions are raised by members of the subcommittee or by those present, please signify this by using the chat facility set out on the right-hand side of the screen you are viewing this meeting on. The meeting manager will alert me if I do not notice messages in the chat. I will determine verbally or in writing or on the chat facility the order in which questions are dealt with. Additionally, you may also seek to notify a question or point verbally in the usual way at the appropriate point. So if at any point in the meeting you wish to speak, please type the word speak into the chat function, and the meeting manager will ensure that we come to that at the appropriate moment. If at any point you cannot hear or having problems with your internet connection, please use the chat facility to alert the meeting manager. The chair will then ask the person speaking to repeat what they have just said. It is therefore important that you use the chat function as soon as you're unable to hear the person speaking. It may well be that the problem is caused by people still having their microphones or cameras on, which creates interference. So remind everyone to please mute your microphones and turn off your cameras when you're not the person speaking. Could I point out that occasionally it may be necessary for the subcommittee to take legal advice. At my discretion, I may ask all parties to wait in the meeting whilst members and the relevant officers withdraw to take legal advice using a separate meeting within Microsoft Teams. We will then return to the meeting and continue. Please note that at any time the live stream being broadcast on the City Council's website fails, I will ask you all to mute your microphones and cameras and then to stop speaking until the live stream is restored. If at any time this meeting goes into private session, the meeting manager will pause the live stream. Once the private part of the meeting is over, I will ask the meeting manager to confirm the live stream has resumed before we continue. At the conclusion of the hearing, I will invite all parties to make a brief closing submission. Can I stress that no decision will be taken until all the evidence has been heard. At the decision-making stage, the members and the relevant officers will withdraw from the meeting in order to determine the decision. They'll go into separate Microsoft Teams meeting. In the event that members need to clarify any point, you will be telephoned by the meeting manager. The members will then make their decision. Notification of the determination of the application will be sent out to all parties within 5 working days. I hope that's reasonably straightforward. So with that, can I ask the licensing officer, Shahid Yasser, to present the report, please, as slowly and as clearly as you possibly can.
Thank you very much, Chair. Exover Spaces Limited applied on the 29th of September 2021 for the grant of a premises licence for Exover Spaces, 19 George Street, Borsall Heath, Birmingham, B12 9RG. Councillors, the purpose of the report before you today is to consider the relevant representations that have been made in respect of an application for a premises licence, which seeks to permit the sale of alcohol for consumption on the premises to operate from 11 AM until 10 PM Sunday, 6 PM until 10 PM Monday to Wednesday, 6 PM until 11 PM Thursday, and 11 AM until 11 PM Friday and Saturday. The provision of regulated entertainment consisting of plays and live music to operate indoors only from 11 AM until 10 PM Sunday, 10 PM until 10 PM 6 PM until 10 PM Monday to Wednesday, 6 PM until 11 PM Thursday, and 11 AM until 11 PM Friday and Saturday. The premises wish to remain open to the public from 10 AM until 10 PM Sunday to Wednesday, 10 AM until 11 PM Thursday and Saturday. Representations have been received and these are attached to appendices 1 to 8 of your report. The application is attached to appendix 9. Conditions have been agreed with West Midlands Police and the applicant, and these are attached to appendix 10. Conditions have also been agreed with Birmingham City Council Licensing Enforcement Team, and this is attached to appendix 11. There's also a site location plan attached to appendix 12 of your report. When carrying out its licensing function, a licensing authority must have regard to Birmingham City Council's Statement of Licensing Policy and the guidance issued by the Secretary of State under Section 182 of the Licensing Act 2003. The licensing authority is also required to take such steps as it considers appropriate for the promotion of the licensing objectives. The options which are available to you today are to grant the license in accordance with the application, to reject the application, to grant the license subject to conditions modified to such an extent as you consider appropriate, exclude from the license any of the licensable activities to which the application relates, or to refuse to specify the person in the license as a premises supervisor. Thank you for that, Chair.
Thank you, Shahid. Would the applicant or their representative like to make their representation now, please? Mr. Craig.
Yes, Chair. This is an application for the grant of a premises licence, as has been set out by your officer. I'll start off. First of all, there's going to be a modification to the application, namely that regulated entertainment will be removed from the scope of the application. There's simply no point in that being on there, quite frankly, given the provisions of the Live Music Act 2012. So there will be no regulated entertainment whatsoever on this premises licence. So this is simply an application for the sale of alcohol by retail to 2300 hours with a terminal hour of, for closure of half an hour past that. So that is the application as it now stands. The application itself, I think it's fair to concede the operating schedule was a little thin on detail, and that is why there was interventions from both West Midlands Police, and if I may ask you to turn to page 50 in the agenda pack. It was Huram Taj, in fact, who was it a site meeting? Did he meet on site? Was telephone meeting. And following that, I won't read them verbatim, but there were 12 conditions that were agreed, and they related to staff training, risk assessments, challenge 25, incident register, refusal register, CCTV, and it being retained for 31 days. Doors and windows remaining shut at all times apart from ingress and egress. And obviously that's aimed at public nuisance. A dispersals policy being kept at the premises, and obviously that will need to be in situ before any licensable activities take place, should you be minded to grant the licence. No open drinking vessels to be taken beyond the boundaries of the premises. Again, that's to some extent aimed at public nuisance. Risk assessment of SAA door staff on an ad hoc basis. Turning to page 51, furthermore, under 18s not to be allowed on the premises after 1900 hours without being accompanied or supervised by a responsible adult. The premises staff will not be left in charge of any under 18s at the premises at any given time. So that those conditions, along with number 3, in fact, are aimed at the protection of children from harm licensing objectives. So obviously the police have considered this application, and those are the representations that they've made so far as they existed, and now obviously they've got no objection to this application. Then at page 52, Gary Callaghan spoke to the premises and asked a further condition to be added to the premises licence by way of a requirement that there's a notice that it's prominently displayed at the premises requesting that customers respect the needs of local residents and other businesses, importantly in the vicinity, and to leave the premises quietly. And I think it's right to say that representation, such as it was, occurred following the representations that were made by other persons. And so there are no representations and have been no representations that have been made by environmental health. And I know from many applications that I've submitted in the city that they do get heavily involved where they think it's appropriate. And so in very broad terms, if you turn or consider paragraph 9.12 of the section 182 guidance, which states that responsible authorities are experts in their own field and should be the main source of advice that you look to when considering an application. Those responsible authorities within this council and within this city have considered the application, have asked for modifications to it. Those modifications have taken place, and the licence holder is content with those. And so that is the application as it stands, with, as I say, or have just said, the removal of regulated entertainment, which is partly a legal point, I guess, but also it's also a recognition that my client is not here to upset anybody. He has a business that he's looking to put some small events on. I will turn to some of the narrative in the representation shortly, but he does not want to upset anybody locally. He's made that clear to me from the outset, and he's also made it clear he has a very good relations with your local neighbours in general, and so that is his position. So turning now to the representations, I'll just briefly take you through my involvement in this process, because it is relevant to the representations that have been made. In my view, it is relevant to the veracity and arguably the provenance, in fact, of these representations. So I just, Rich, you contacted me, when was it? 3 weeks ago?
Yes. Yeah.
Contacted me 3 weeks ago. I happened to be in Moseley, actually, so I popped down pretty shortly thereafter and met him at the premises and had a very brief chat with him, and then headed off over the sunset because, as ever, I was insanely busy that day. And then I didn't really look at things till the following week, but I did then get the I think I got the reps through actually fairly quickly, but I didn't get a chance to look at them. But I was struck by the nature of the representations, both in terms of the addresses that were on the representations, the fact there was an absence of email addresses. Not that that's a requirement at all, but it is unusual and noteworthy. It's worth remarking upon the fact that they were all pretty much identical, carried the same hallmarks, and well, they were all the same. Frankly, I think that's a position. So what I then did was I emailed your licensing authority asking for the best available means of contacting those individuals who'd made representations, and then following that information being in my possession, I then wrote via mail to most of them because there were no email addresses, although to one of them I did email, inviting them to meet me at the premises. And I need to say, with this talk of intimidation here, the notion that a member of the bar is going to arrange to meet people in order to intimidate them is frankly laughable. I'm inviting them to meet them because that's what look, my job is to get my client's application granted in a way that not only means he gets his license, but that he's in a position where he's got good relations with his neighbours at that point in time and going forward. That's not, you know, I am paid to represent my client's best interests, and included in that is that he walks out of this process with a sustainable relationship with those that he lives. So I always say in those circumstances, let's just get around a table. Let's see if there's any differences we can iron out. If these people have got concerns, if they're genuine, we can perhaps try and address them. And if they're not, at least we can try and explain. And that is what I do. And so, because it's the best way to try and resolve these things. So I invited all those people whose representations were outstanding, because I think a number were rejected as not being relevant, to meet me at the premises last Friday at 5 o'clock. And I was there about 10 to, was I? Yeah. And I stayed till 5:30. Now, I am not being critical of anyone who didn't turn up, but I'm duty bound to point out the fact that people were invited to and chose not to attend in order to try and iron these issues out. But what it also afforded me the opportunity to do was have a walk round. And so I walked with my client up to, you'll see that the addresses of the representations, they're basically in two bunches. You've got numbers 53 to 58 at George Street. Now, I walked up the road, I paced it out, in fact, and it is about 200 metres, give or take, to the furthest address. I mean, look, I'm pacing it out. It might be a bit less, it might be a bit more, but I think that is a reasonable figure there or thereabouts. It could potentially be 180 metres, but look, it's in the order of 200 metres up the road. There is simply, particularly with the absence of regulated entertainment, the notion that there will be any nuisance whatsoever from these premises that will interfere with these people's lives is absurd, based on my observations. That is the only word that I can deploy that adequately represents the position as I saw it that day. There are then two other addresses, namely 17 and 15 George Street, which certainly appeared to me to be unoccupied. There was nobody in there. There were no lights on. It looks like there's some development going on. And it's right to say they are much closer to the premises itself. You go, instead of turning right and going up the road, you turn left and go. It's only a few doors down. There's some commercial units next to your premises, and they're the immediate buildings beyond, aren't they? On the same side, of the road, whereas the others are on the opposite side. I then got instructions that is Mohammed Dawood. As I understand it, a couple of things. Firstly, he owns 15 and 17 and is developing them, and he has put his name down as living or being a resident at 17. I'm not going to say that is incorrect, but certainly my understanding from my client is that he in fact lives at 58. But I'm not saying that Tabarik Hussein doesn't live at 58, because I understand there are a number of people living in that property. So the client then said to me that Mohammed Dawood has expressed to him on a number of occasions that he simply doesn't want this application to get over the line, for reasons that appear to be down to commercial self-interest, and that he is of the view, and certainly I'm making this representation on his behalf. If I felt it had no basis whatsoever, I wouldn't be making it. That he has driven these objections to this modest application under the Licensing Act, and certainly based on the conversations that Rich has had with Mr. Dawood, that is certainly a robust view that he holds. Then turn to the representations themselves, and I am assisted greatly in that process by virtue of the fact that they're all identical to each other, so I don't need to take you through all of them. So I'll take you through simply the one that's at Appendix 1, which is at page 3, if I may. Because there are a number of false statements within these representations. There are a number of misconceptions. There are a number of things that are just wholly irrelevant, and I will gladly take you through them. First of all, we're talking about a permanent closure, or I think it's permanent closure, or it's actually a permanent claw order, but I assume that's a permanent closure order to be granted for the premises. Well, you'll know this committee has no power to grant a closure order. That only Magistrates' Court can order one of those. It says here for the last 15 years runs an accounting firm, so that they are slightly distinguished from each other, but it's saying this holy building to be turned into a concert venue. Well, let me just put things in context for you. I would say the space itself is about 3 Ellen Pinsent rooms up against each other, give or take. It isn't particularly long. What is it, 20 metres long? Yeah. About right? And about 10 metres wide. That's it. So to describe it as a concert venue, that doesn't accord with any concert venue I've been in. Loud music, well, we now know that regulated entertainment isn't part of the scope of the application. Operate till late hours, well, it's 11 o'clock for the sale of alcohol by retail. It is an absolute outrage being capitalised. It also confirmed the premises as a church, not a cafe. Well, it still hasn't been a church for a while, is it?
No, not 5 years.
5 years it hasn't been a church for. And it's been done to camouflage it as a cafe. I don't think you wouldn't describe it as a cafe, would you? No. So it's not a cafe. And they've got a meeting with the Birmingham Mail about this. Well, I haven't seen anything in the Birmingham Mail, and they're not shy for any stories relating to licensed premises. I know from personal experience. Point 2, it then goes on fraudulent, although it's spelled incorrectly on all of them, as in MISS, new word representation. I'm presuming that's fraudulent misrepresentation, use of the premises. Well, that's an allegation against my client, which is actually reprehensible. I don't, it's basically accusing my client of being dishonest. Well, there's absolutely no basis for that whatsoever. It's not a church. I've already made that point. It then goes on in point 3. The issue of alcohol licenses area will lead to the area becoming saturated with a certain type of clientele. Slightly concerned about that wording, to be honest, because I know, has Mo expressed concern about the type of clientele?
Yeah.
Has he made particular reference?
Yeah, just in terms of the people. He said to me, what are you doing with the venue?
Let me just put it this way, that Mr. Dawood has expressed a concern to my client about a particular type of client attending the premises, which is certainly not something I would ever want to be associated with. And that's certainly been echoed within these representations, people from a certain community, in fact. And it also says it will have a direct effect to its neighbours. Well, that's just pure speculation. It then goes in point 4, noise pollution levels, extremely disruptive to offices that operate during the day until late nights. Well, that simply isn't the case because there's no regulated entertainment on the premises licence. And just to make the point is, under the Live Music Act, you don't need a licence to do what to carry on what otherwise would be regulated entertainment up to 11 o'clock. So if you don't grant this licence, my client can still do those things anyway without a licence. So it's not relevant to your consideration today. All we're considering today is the application for the sale of alcohol by retail. So any reference to noise nuisance whatsoever is just simply not relevant for your deliberations today. I invite you to turn to page 4 now. No private parking to accommodate the large number of concert visitors and other daytime visitors. I do concede my client accepts there are parking issues in the area, but they've been there for some time. It's not a relevant consideration for you today in any event, the parking. But given the size of the venue and the type of venue, I know a lot of people come on foot anyway, won't they? I mean, most people are going to come on foot. That is simply just not a consideration for you today. The number of extra cars there might be in an area where people already struggle, and that certainly would not be a consideration for you through the scope of the Licensing Act. And then goes on to point 6. Adjoining building will be directly affected as there are offices on both levels that adjoin to the church. Well, there are noise levels. I don't know why this is underlined, by the way. I really don't know. But anyway, noise levels will travel throughout my office and place of work is part of this building. The church at the front of my office is directly on the same floor. The only thing that separates us is a single wall, and the noise penetrates through. Well, my client hasn't been putting any events on. I mean, that's the other thing. No events at all. There's been nothing going on at the premises. What have we had? You've had a kids?
Yeah, a kids party and a yoga launch.
A kids party and a yoga launch. That's all he's had on since he's taken the space. Yeah. Since he's taken the space on. So all these suggestions that there's raves going on at the place and rock concerts and whatnot, that just simply is not true. It's false. Number 7, glass bottles may be used as weapons. Well, that is correct, but that's true of any licensed premise. In actual fact, extraneous to licensed premises as well. Point 8, plastic cups and rubbish problems. Well, again, that could be true of any retail venue or any establishment, whether they're licensed or not. Point 9, school children parents will feel intimidated by, and presume that is meant to mean by, large crowds. Well, there aren't going to be large crowds. I don't quite know what point that's trying to make, quite frankly. Number 10, loud music being played, causing nuisance to neighbours at all times during the day and night. That's again speculation, not relevant to this application. Loud music, again, not relevant to this application. Foot traffic that will exacerbate on the residential homes on George Street after closing hours. Again, just simply not relevant. You have a local councillor who is happy to associate himself with this, frankly, shambolic, embarrassing representation that is incoherent and poorly put together, misconceived, and frankly misleading. And I'm very interested to hear what he's got to say. My client absolutely denies whatsoever any suggestion that he's involved in any intimidation of anybody. I'll be very interested to hear what the crime number is. Councillor Malik says a report's been made to the police. If he's willing to disclose the crime number, I'd be very grateful. Certainly, my client's not heard anything.
Not at all.
Client's not heard anything. My client, you will have seen from the supporting documents that I've sent in. Let me just quickly deal with those before I conclude. He is a vegan.
I am.
He has. You've got Exova. I was called it Zova actually. So it's Exova Nutrition on High Street in Kings Heath. Vegans aren't generally known for their truculence, but I suppose that it's not a hard and fast rule. But certainly, based on my dealings with it, any suggestion that this gentleman, actually, nice man, it would in any way ever intimidate anybody is preposterous and laughable. I'm going to say that now, Councillor Malik. It's laughable that you've said that. I then just conclude the representation that I make on behalf of the. If you go to my supporting documents, at page 7. There is the letter that I sent out to the local residents who've purported to make representations or objections to this application. And that was posted by first class mail because that was the only means to contact them. So hopefully you've had the opportunity to read that. As I said, nobody turned up. and then apologies. There is a further. So if you put page 8 of my supporting documents is the email I sent to info@PropertyLink, and I must address that as well. So the representation from PropertyLink which is at page 27, which is appendix 8. I emailed them twice, and they aren't here today. In fact, none of the local residents are here today. Apparently too intimidated to dial into a Microsoft Teams meeting. It says over the last 2 weeks, we have had many complaints of antisocial behaviour, loud music, car parking issues, car parking within our private car park, and causing nuisance. So I don't know whether that was the yoga party or the children's party, the kids party. I'm not sure, or maybe it was both. I don't know. This antisocial behaviour is totally unacceptable and is not sustainable. The antisocial nightclub activities will not be tolerated and is already having an adverse effect on the business tenants and their operations. These representations are vexatious. They have absolutely no substance. They are full of false statements, misconceive the considerations under the Licensing Act. And so accordingly, I will invite you respectfully to grant the application as it now stands. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Craig. Members, do we have any questions?
No questions, Chair.
I have a question.
Councillor Davis.
Hello, Mr. Craig.
Mr. Councillor Davis, I'm sorry.
We can't hear you.
Not very
Councillor
clear.
Davis. Can you speak louder?
Can you hear me now?
Just about.
Let me just see if I can. Okay. I had a question about the documentation.
Yes.
The reference to a brunch and play event on the 30th of October. I think this is page 28 on my document.
Yeah. So yeah, I did actually make reference to that in my email. My client put a 10 in.
Because Mo was very hostile.
Yeah. So Mr. Dawood was very hostile. He had his application. He pulled the event. It never took place.
Oh, that never took place.
That was the temporary event notice. In my email, I mentioned a 10. That was the 10. And because Mr. Dawood was quite strident about it to him, and because he had the application, he just thought the best thing to do was pull the event. The event never took place.
So this reference to the antisocial nightclub activities on document 29 from the property link, again, you assert that is just not true.
Correct.
Okay.
And Councillor Davis, I've been in front of you enough times. I don't bandy things about things like that about lightly. I don't. I have to have clear evidence to allege matters of falsehoods. But in my view, the matters that are in there, based on matters within my knowledge, based on my instructions, are absolutely clearly false. False.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. So no further questions. We'll move on to presentations. So can those making representations please present their case now? Councillor Zur Malik.
Thank you, Chair. I said in the opening gambit,
You're on mute, Councillor Malik.
sorry. Okay, as I said in the beginning, the whole only reason I'm here today is because the people around the vicinity of 19 George Street felt intimidated. And just very quickly to answer a couple of questions that the barrister raised, in the sense that about the crime number and all that, let me clarify that I actually phoned and spoke to a sergeant, what's his name?
Mr. Malik, I wonder if you can just confine yourself to just discussing the objections to the application, please.
Okay, no problems. Okay, the first thing I'm going to turn around and say is one of the objections is that it is still registered as a church on the land registry. So, and I'm not aware of any planning applications to change the use of the premises. But the other one is I've been informed that events have been taking place. The 30th of October has been mentioned that was cancelled, and it is actually advertised as Caribbean Brunch Party. And it was, but previous to that, there was one on the 23rd of October, which some of the residents have got a recording of, and which is in my possession. If you want me to just play it, I will willingly do that for you, so that the accusation against the people I'm representing is that basically that they're not telling the truth. I have recordings, and even the CCTV footage clearly states that there was a party going on, music was being played, and this is even before this has taken place. The other thing that I need very importantly to raise is that there is a school that operates 7 days a week and is only, I would say, 20 meters or 30 meters away. Also, there's a church that has been there for God knows how many years, about 100 years or so. But don't hold me to that, but which has funerals and weddings, which is only about 20, 30 meters, 10 meters away. So the concern for there is by having the alcohol premises there is going to cause a big disruption to people. But the most importantly, what you need to understand that on George Street, there's a shop called Amex Wines. Then the Clock Pub is down the bottom of George Street on the corner of Edward Road and George Street. And then there's an old Mosley Arms, which is through the park on George Street on Tyndall Street. So there's enough places selling alcohol there. And because of the disruption it's going to cause the residents, the school and the church, the residents are objecting to that. Now, let me just elaborate a bit more. Noise issues for surrounding buildings, IGC building and for residents. There's a IGC Chartered Surveyors building was hit with level of noise, antisocial behaviour and parking issues. The applicant who applied for license visiting parking inside the neighbours, they were actually parking inside the neighbour buildings, causing distress for those who work there. Also, the level of noise this venue was outputting caused problems those who were working till late. As I don't know if you're aware, but this is a 24/7. Some of the businesses operate 24/7. There's a security firm there that operates 24/7. And there's multiple offices who work during the night, in fact, 24 hours, as there are care agencies, housing agencies, as well as solicitor firms, which work till late nights. There are residential houses 6 meters to its left, and the level of noise was shocking. And these are what I feel that I have to raise these because this is what has actually happened. There's a resident whose number I will share if required, whose son is disabled and had his car blocked by a visitor and when asked kindly to move his car as he requires 24 access, the individual started to complain, citing there's no parking. Where do I park? I need to be at the venue. Multiple residents had issues getting into their drives as the road was totally chock-a-block. Residents could not park. So, it's all fair and good saying that there is a parking issue on the roads. I mean, I have to concur that there's a parking issue everywhere. But what we don't want to do is exaggerate something more that, you know, if, you know, and I can't understand the issue of saying people will be walking there, because as I've explained, there's a wine shop and 2 pubs in the vicinity. The level of noise from foot traffic and individuals speeding off Holmes and George Street after the event closed was also a big nuisance, as people were getting into their cars. They were swearing, they were littering, and when challenged, some of them even turned around and said, where do you want us to park? And bear in mind, please, that the application is for 150 to 200 people. In one of the tenants, in one of the numbers, which I said I will share if required, blocked the main gate and into their business. And when they turned around and said, "Can we please move?" There was 2. I'll put it in their words, 2 bouncers or security people standing there who got very, very aggressive, and this had an impact on him getting in. So the venue hasn't got any parking spaces for its 150 to 200 visitors, nor is it soundproofing, as the level of noise supersedes businesses as well, residential homes emit. Residents and businesses have a right to enjoy their homes and not worry about who is blocking their drives. The level of noise that non-soundproof building is outputting and individuals causing antisocial behaviour. And I've already covered a bit about the health licence and the 2 public houses. I can confirm that the event that was publicised on social media for the date of the 23rd of October, which actually took place, and we've got CCTV coverage of that, and somebody recorded the noise volume of that. I have learned that the 30th, which was also advertised, and which the barrister has kindly termed, has said that they cancelled it, but the accusation that the barrister has made in regarding Mr. Dawood is that Mr. Dawood is willing to attend any meeting anywhere and swear on oath that he has never ever discussed the anything with the applicant in regards to this application. Another thing I need to clarify, the barrister said that he'd emailed or spoke or... Sorry, I'm tethering from my phone, so I don't know how to switch that off, or I'll switch the phone off. About the issue of intimidation. Can I make it clear that the intimidation issue is not from the barrister who wrote to the people or attended on the thing? This was before that. So I just wanted to make that clear. What I will be grateful for the committee is that if you take all these disruptions to the residents' lives, and issues raised, and I would say if you refuse the application, if it helps, I don't have a problem on behalf of the residents and businesses that if the committee want to have a site visit, to have a look at it firsthand to assess the situation themselves. And as I already said, that the impact of issuing an alcohol license in the area will lead becoming a I mean, that I'm reading from the piece of paper that was given to me, but it will have a direct effect, and it's already had a direct effect because of the 23rd of October party that they had. It wasn't for kids, and it was till 11 o'clock, half 11 at night. So I'd like to know what kids are up at 11 o'clock at night to go into such parties. So what I will turn around and say is, please take into account the church, the school, and the issues of one of the other issues I want to raise. I mean, I think I've already covered the land registry. I've got a copy of that, which basically was only done a week and a half ago, and it still says it's a church. But the biggest issue for me is the children, impact it's going to have on the children, the impact it's going to have on the parents taking the children there, the impact it's going to have on the people living 3, 4, 5, 6 or 10, 15 meters away, and the impact it's going to have on the business people who won't be able to go, has already demonstrated, into their businesses. And I need to stress this, that if you want a statement from Mr. Dawood, he is willing to make a statement to the fact that the applicant has never, ever approached him in regards to the application. Never. As a matter of fact, what Mr. Dawood actually said to me, that his son was threatened by the applicant. So, you know, I'm gonna be quiet there for a minute to see what anybody else has to say that. But I will be grateful that you, I'm speaking on behalf of my residents, that, you know, this application wasn't granted for the issues that I've already raised. And if the committee need copies of the CCTV footage or the phone recording, they're quite welcome to have them.
Thank you, Councillor Malik. Thank you. I'll take any questions from members now.
No questions from me, Chair.
One question from me.
Councillor Davis, yes?
So, Councillor Malik, I mean, do you agree that the October 30th event did not take place?
Yes, Councillor Davies, the event on the 30th did not take place. Due to, my belief is, the complaints of everybody around the vicinity, and I actually informed the police of the fact that there was going to be a another party going to be held on the 30th. I do know the police officer went to speak to the residents. I do not know what the result of that was, because I had a conversation between the police and the residents.
Okay. Thank you. Any further questions, Councillor Davies?
But Councillor Malik, you say an event took place on the 23rd of October.
Yes, that's correct. And CCTV recording proves that. And also, one of the business users stroke residents has recorded it on his mobile phone, which, as I said, is readily available if you require it.
So do you know the nature of that event?
Yes, the residents have turned around and said it was not a children's party. It was a full-blown party where adults, and there was so many cars parked there, and it went on till 11:30 at night. Loud music was played, which could be heard, and the recording that I'm referring to, I've actually heard it on the mobile phone, and it was recorded from outside, from the road, and you can hear it.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Thank you, Councillor Malik. Right, so we'll now take the closing submissions in reverse order. So do those making representations wish to make a closing submission? Councillor Zur-Malik.
Thank you, Councillor. I've already stated everything in and I don't want to go over it over again, but the biggest concerns for me are the impact it's going to have on the residents, the businesses, the school, the church, and the massive parking issues it's going to have. So, you know, in closing, all I will say to you is, please reject this application, because there's already a wine shop on the road. There's 2 public houses on the road, just nearby, basically one on the bottom of the road and one across the road. So on that basis, because of the nuisance and the issues concerning the businesses and the residents, I will urge you to reject this application.
Thank you, Councillor Malik. Does the applicant or their representative wish to make a closing submission now, please?
Yes, please. I'll deal with a number of points that Councillor Malik has made very briefly. You'll be glad to hear. First of all, I can confirm the 30th of October was the night of the yoga launch.
23rd.
Oh, sorry, the 23rd. Forgive me. The 23rd, which is when the event went ahead. Forgive me. The 30th didn't go ahead, but the 23rd was the yoga launch. So you can draw your own conclusions from that in terms of any noise output from a yoga launch. Quite frankly, Councillor Malik's made reference to recordings. None of the evidence is before you. You simply can't speculate. No way of verifying whether that's accurate, where the noise has come from, what date it was taken on. He's not served any of the evidence as required. And so accordingly, you can completely discount anything he said in relation to that. My client, I asked my client about Mr. Dawood's son. He immediately responded, he doesn't even know he has a son. So there you go with that. In terms of the cars on the road, there is a firm called SY Motors that does park quite a lot of cars on there. I think Mr. Dawood has actually raised complaints with Councillor Malik about SY Motors and about the number of cars on the road. The figure of 150 to 200 capacity, I've been going through the application. I can't see any reference to that anywhere. So I don't know where that figure's been plucked from. In terms of the church, well, look, first of all, if you go to St Philip's Church, there are licensed premises that encircle it. So that's simply not a relevant consideration. But the church that Councillor Malik refers to, you're a member of that church. He's a Catholic. My client is a Catholic and a member of that particular church that Councillor Malik made reference to. Councillor Malik's frequently referred to the need in the premises. Well, you'll know as a committee that's not a relevant consideration. This isn't in the Moseley cumulative impact area, which in any event is suspended, and accordingly need is not a consideration. Consideration is balancing out this application against the interests of the wider community, and there are now a number of conditions on the licence that are proportionate, that are targeted at specific issues that could potentially arise from the premises in order to mitigate any impact on the local community. And so accordingly, officers within this city and West Midlands Police have considered this application and are content with the application as it stands, and were content with the application as it stood, I should add. It's subsequently been modified to make it more onerous upon the applicant. It's now simply an application for a sale of alcohol in what is, to all intents and purposes, a village hall, or something that would resemble a village hall, till 11 o'clock at night. And so the only thing you need to consider is this, quite frankly, those representations. Councillor Malik has added nothing to those, and adding nothing to something that has no substance, relevance, or probative value means that those representations carry no merit whatsoever, in my view. And on that basis, and on the basis that responsible authorities are content with this application, I would respectfully submit the only logical course for you to follow, and the only fair, reasonable and proportionate and appropriate course for you to follow is to grant the application as it now stands. And thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Craig. Right, I will now ask all parties to leave the Microsoft Teams meeting, and members of the committee, committee lawyer and committee manager will go into the private session while the subcommittee makes its decision. You'll be notified of the decision of the subcommittee within 5 working days. Thank you.
Thank you all.